Yes, I had expected my life to be an innocent life of a physicist. But when I was leaving to go to study in Canada, which is where I did my PhD, I just wanted to visit my favorite spots in my home region. I come from the Himalaya. And I went to this place which used to have a beautiful oak forest and a lovely stream, and I thought I'd have a last swim. And the forest was gone. It had been converted into an apple orchard, and there was no stream anymore. There was a trickle of water. That's when I started to realize that we can't take it for granted, that this beautiful planet will be intact for the future. And while talking to people in villages, I found out about this beautiful movement, which is called Chipko, which means to embrace, to hug. And I made a commitment I would be there with them every vacation, even while I did my PhD, and even in the years later when I continued to be in research institutions. And agriculture I was forced to look at because of 1984, the Bhopal disaster, the rise of violence in Punjab. And Punjab is the land where the Green Revolution, the name given to chemical agriculture in the Third World, it was first implemented. And it was given a Nobel Peace Prize, and there wasn't any peace in Punjab. So I was working those days for the United Nations University, and I decided to study the Green Revolution, wrote a book called The Violence of the Green Revolution, and realized that if I had to make a change, I had to commit myself to sustainable agriculture. I think if the world is stable and today will be like tomorrow, it's fine, you can be in an ivory tower. But when the world around us is collapsing, the ecological world, look at climate havoc, look at species extinction, look at the disappearance of water within decades, look at the fact that our planet is burdened with toxics of all kinds, the neonicotinoids and the glyphosates, and the fact that society itself is in disarray, and the future is being closed on young people. I think it is immoral and unethical for anyone doing an intellectual work to not combine their thought with their action. I believe, both because of my understanding, my research, as well as the wisdom of our ancestors, that ecological sustainability and social justice are two sides of the same coin. First, because we are on this common planet, and if some people privatize the planet, privatize the seed, farmers are in crisis. If some people want to spread monocultures, diversity of species go, and with it the diversity of our diets, and with it malnutrition and hunger grows. Gandhi had put it very, very simply. The earth has enough for everyone's needs, but not for a few people's greed. And he had distilled this from an ancient Indian text called the Ishopanishad, which says, this planet is for the well-being of all. Some people using more than their share are stealing from other species, other people, or the future. So ecological non-sustainability is theft, because you are preventing nature from renewing herself. You're stealing from nature. You're preventing nature from providing for all beings, all species, as well as all humans. No one should be without water. No one should be without food. I've written a number of books, Staying Alive, Ecofeminism, to show that because over time we had a division of labor, especially with fossil fuels, industrialization, men being pulled out into factories, women being left home to take care of the children, food. In the third world, women being left to get the water, the fuel, the fodder, while the men were migrating. Because of that division of labor, we have a cultural division of the relationship of nature. Not a biological division, it's not in our genes, but it is in the fact that women were left to work in what I call the sustenance economy. And economics has defined as not working. That if you're providing care, if you're getting the water, if you're getting the fuel, if you're cooking the food, it's not the economy because it's not contributing to growth. As a result of which, of course, the women's sphere has shrunk in terms of the resources available, even while the burden on women has increased as a neoliberal paradigm of the economy takes more and more of the earth's resources and puts it into fewer and fewer hands. What are the implications of this? The implications of this are that we all need to engage in a sustenance economy because the dominant economy has place for only 62 men. 62 men are now controlling the wealth of half the planet. It's a 1% economy where 99% are excluded. So for all the 99%, men and women, children and old people, trees and butterflies, we all need to shift to the logic of caring and sharing, of making compassion the basis of our relationships, not conquest. Well, biodiversity is important because it is the web of life. You can't weave a web of life with uniformity. There has to be give and take, there has to be mutuality, there have to be cycles, and all of that is only possible with diversity. If we only had humans and no trees, there would be no mechanism to convert the carbon dioxide we exhale into the oxygen we need to breathe. That is why diversity is vital. If there weren't pollinators in the world to pollinate our crops, that would be the end of our food security. So no part of this web of life is dispensable. But in agriculture, which has been my focus, biodiversity is vital, first because it actually increases food production. We've been given this very false pseudoscience that you need monocultures to increase yields. Monocultures produce commodities. Food comes from biodiverse systems. Biodiversity provides the ecological functions that are the alternative to the synthetic fertilizers. If you have biodiversity in your soil, you don't need synthetic fertilizers. You get all the fertility with the work of soil organisms. If you have diversity of insects through diversity of plants, you have wonderful pest-predator relationships. You don't need to spray pesticides. If you have diversity in cover crops, you don't get an invasion of weeds. You don't need weedicides. So in fact, all the chemicals in agriculture are made to look inevitable because biodiversity is gone. But biodiversity is also vital for our health and nutrition. It is now being recognized that monoculture diets are a very big source of malnutrition. And I would say biodiversity is vital for peace in society because so much of the monoculture of the mind is leading to exclusion, to hate and fear, and Europe is in the heart of this culture of hate. You know, the oil age, the fossil fuel age is such a young age. It's just 2.5 centuries. When coal was first found and it allowed the substitution of human energy and renewable energy with non-renewable energy. Why does coal take all the attention? Why does oil take all the attention? Because this is where profits are. This is where control is. If I have a solar panel on my rooftop, a big government or a big industry doesn't control my life. And we have ended up being in a situation where governance through control and centralization has become a habit. And allowing people to be free, allowing nature to be free, has become a source of fear and insecurity for those who would seek control. But that decentralized system of providing food and a decentralized system of providing energy is vital. In fact, the biggest fossil fuel economy is actually the food economy now through industrial agriculture. I wrote my book, Soil Not Oil, because I realized more than 40% of the greenhouse gases come from industrial farming and globalized trade in food, we could get rid of this and make better food systems. We could get rid of it and have healthier nourishment, most importantly, by turning to organic farming and recycling carbon and getting rid of the synthetic fertilizers based on fossil fuels, the pesticides based on fossil fuels, the heavy mechanization based on fossil fuels. You actually have a way out of the climate havoc because you have a way of pulling out the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and putting it into the soil. I don't think colonialism is over, because the structures of colonialism continue to be used both in international relationships for the North to dominate the South. And if you look at all the structures of global decision making, you look at the IMF, you look at the World Bank, you look at the WTO, they are continuation of colonialism. In fact, we have called it recolonization. But even within countries like India, the idea that a government can just go grab the land of the peasants or the tribals comes out of that 1493 Papal Bull, that you can have eminent domain, that you can have the power to deny others their rights, to take away their resources. And this really is the definition of development. You can't define development in any other way except saying businesses and governments have the right to appropriate resources. That, to me, is colonization continuing within countries. Well, you know, I started my physics career in India's nuclear establishment. I was training to join our Atomic Energy Commission, and I would have if my sister hadn't asked me for some basic questions. She's a medical doctor, and as a physicist, I'm not taught about the health implications. I was training in India's first experimental fast breeder reactor. And after I realized that there are health implications about which we are not taught, I left. Of course, since then, I have become much, much more aware of the larger harms and the larger risks of both nuclear power. Look at the Fukushima disaster, as well as nuclear weapons. So, yes, I'm worried about the splitting of the atom as irresponsible act to control, and you can't control. Fukushima tells you it's a mistaken will to control, or the splicing of genes. And what genetic engineering is at the genetic level, nuclear power and nuclear weapons are at the level of the atoms. Well, growth is measured by a very crude and primitive measure, which is how much did you pull out of nature, how much did you pull out of society? Because the definition of growth is if you produce what you consume, you don't produce. The result of India's high growth as a result of the neoliberal economies has been more ecological havoc than we have ever seen, and more destruction of local economies than we've ever witnessed. This globalization has pushed every second child to severe malnutrition. It has pushed every fourth Indian to hunger. It has led to 300,000 farmer suicides. But most importantly, it can only exist by undoing the democratic institutions that we have built. For example, I was part of drafting a law on the rights of indigenous people and forest-dwelling people. And this was called a law for correcting the wrong of not treating them with full rights as Indian citizens. We also had a law on tribal self-rule, that because tribals have governed themselves, this is how they should continue to govern themselves. All of these laws are not just not being obeyed, they are being violated. And a very simple phenomena, heart of India is tribal India. Heart of India is very mineral rich. This forest-rich area today is being mined. In the early days, and I was there at witness for the tribal, because they would call some of us, The tribals would sit and make decisions over 3 days, 4 days, totally through consensus. Do we want a steel plant or don't we? Do we want a coal mine or don't we? And at the end of all consideration, they would say, no, we will stay in our forest. We will not exchange our home for big money and be displaced. Then the armed forces were brought in, the paramilitary forces were brought in, militias were created. And today that area, which was the most peaceful area of India, which even the British had not been able to enter, is a war zone. Every day people are dying from both sides, from the sides of government and paramilitary and the sides of the tribals. So democracy is sacrificed for growth. I was very, very involved in the Earth Summit, in the shaping of the Convention on Biological Diversity, in the discussions on climate change. That was 1992. We are now in 2016. The international agencies knew what they had to do. They still keep having COP after COP after COP. And nothing has happened. In fact, we have slid backwards since 1992. Whether it's in biodiversity or in climate change. So now we need a pressure from the bottom. But not just a pressure from the bottom, we need a redefining of democracy. That's why I talk of Earth democracy. A democracy that realizes we are Earth citizens. A democracy not based on the anthropocentric bias of only for humans. Now, this planet is for all species. And our duty is to protect all species as well as defend our rights, and the two are deeply related. Human rights are a subset of the rights of the earth. And because of that, redefining these worldviews and paradigms, beginning with the worldviews of colonialism, the worldviews of Bacon, the worldviews of neoliberal economics, all of these are so fundamental that one agency looking at one issue can't do it. It has to be people acting as Earth citizens, reclaiming their power through participation and saying, we will shape another world, and there will then be the pressure upwards. Some governments will shift, then other governments will have to shift. Through this, then, the international system will do what it should be doing in any case, performing the roles of international responsibility.